Okay, the recording has started, and this is the June 25th, 2019 Crossplane community meeting. So we will go ahead and start with a bit of a checkup on the current milestone and the items in progress and some of the stickier issues and such. So just a bit of a reminder here. We are currently in the 0.3 milestone. And there are two big focuses that we have left concerning this current milestone. One of them is, we took a step back and we thought about, what are the big items or the looming questions or some of the unanswered questions that we have now that may pose the biggest risk, or things that we want to front load and de-risk early on here. So we're doing some design investigations on some of the hairier issues here to kind of get on top of those and kind of hopefully flesh out a lot of the remaining path for subsequent milestones. So that'll be a big focus in the 0.3 milestone that we'll look at in just a second. And then, as we talked in a previous community meeting, we are also taking a focus on engineering quality and process stuff, some refactors of the code base as we've kind of iterated over it since the beginning of the project or late last year. And we've also identified some items that are obstacles or difficulties for new contributors to get involved in the project, or for new users of the project as well. So kind of a quality focus and an engineering focus is the other side of the coin here for the 0.3 milestone. So let's go ahead, and I think the project board gives us the best view, honestly. I went and organized this project board just earlier today before the meeting here, so this should be completely up to date. And we're not going to go through every single issue here, but I do want to call out some of the more important ones, or maybe get some updates on some of them as well. Is Nick on this morning? It doesn't look like Nick's here, so I'll speak through some of his stuff because I am aware of what's going on there. So one of the currently in review, we have some pull requests open. So one of them that Nick is working on is we have a single controller that has a general implementation for resource claims and resource classes, and binding concrete resources to abstract resources, such as a claim for a Redis service, and then creating, instantiating, deploying, and binding a concrete, Azure, GCP, or AWS Redis service to that abstract Redis claim. So all that logic there is done in a very general way, such that all the different types of resources can benefit from it, like MySQL and Postgres and Kubernetes clusters and Redis and buckets and all that sort of stuff. And so Nick took a pass through that general resource claim controller and identified some substantial ways that it could be re-engineered, refactored, and improved. And he opened up I'm not going to call it a small pull request because it is pretty big, but he did it in stages so that we could kind of understand the general concept and approach and changes, and then also review these subsequent changes a little bit more easily. So if you want to read more about that, Nick wrote up a fantastic description of all the changes and benefits to it that's in issue 547. If you want to read more about that, that's some great prose there to review. So that's I like that change because that affects a lot of different types, since that's a core controller that's used, reused for many of the different types. So I think that's fantastic. And so Nick is also tackling, with that refactor that touches a lot of other parts of the code base, he's also tackling a couple of other issues. So those are all in review together. Marcus took a pass at, as one of the newer contributors to the Crossplane community, Marcus took a pass at some of our documentation that had some issues with it. He already completed updating our examples for Google, for using Google Cloud, and then now Marcus has a pull request open for AWS as well. Marcus, do you want to share anything about that specifically?
Yeah, it's mostly straightforward, moving the old compute workloads to the newer Kubernetes app workloads and updating the documentation for that. Along the way, I found like a few things that I thought made it easier to work with. So the instructions for getting started with AWS were kind of elaborate. A lot of things had to be done in the AWS cloud UI, and so that's been those instructions are still there, but if you want to run a script, there's an AWS credentials SH script that matches what I did with the GCP provisioning script. And so it makes it easier to get started with the examples if you run that script. Sets up the VPC, sets up the CloudFormation stack, sets up several other things. In addition to that, I also found a few places where where say a CloudFormation stack could possibly fail and it wouldn't get caught. And another minor tweak was the output columns on the provider resources. I found myself needing to get access to the secret that was associated with a provider, and also to figure out what the project ID or the region associated with a provider was. And so I added those columns either as the native or as the standard columns or as the wide columns available. I don't think there's anything too much beyond that in there. I kept running into problems just sort of bootstrapping myself on AWS. So I'm hoping that the next person who tries to follow this path doesn't hit as many obstacles as I did.
Yeah, I love in addition to improving the quality, accuracy, and ease of use for the documentation and user examples here to get new users that are new to the Crossplane project and platform, give them a better experience. I also really like your attention that you're taking there, Marcus, to automation as well, where you're writing scripts or writing automation to improve, to decrease the burden or number of manual steps that are required and kind of setting up some environments there. And I'm hoping that we can continue, in a general, a general direction of the project to be able to continue to automate everything really of, decreasing any manual step or even some of the scripts, codify those into our controllers maybe as well as in the future. So that attention to automation and ease of use, I really appreciate. I think the community as a whole benefits from it. So then we have some other tickets that are in progress that are somewhat covered by things we've talked about, but in general, we, as we've talked about, when we started this project, we, wrote a couple of initial controllers. Those patterns that we started with there, we've learned a lot about how to write controllers to manage external cloud resources from Kubernetes. And the newer controllers have, taken those new patterns and lessons and are more robust, more reliable, easier to test, all that sort of stuff. And so this ticket here, 269, is really about being able to converge on a standard pattern for how to write controllers and make sure that we have that reference implementation, that the other controllers are updated to match that pattern. The pattern is well documented, that new contributors that want to add support for new resources, new cloud providers, new services, that they'll be able to easily write a more robust controller as well if needed. And so that can only help to improve the overall quality and standards of the entire project. So we are working on that on a number of different fronts, and that ticket is in progress. There's a couple other things I wanted to call out here. Let's move down to default resource classes, which would be a wonderful improvement to the user experience. Daniel, do you want to talk about that and where you are with that one?
Yep. So I haven't been able to do too much work on it recently, but I've kind of had some conversations in Slack that people may have seen. Nick kind of suggested the implementation as sort of its own separate controller, just for sort of a separation of responsibility there for the different controllers. So I'm looking into what that might look like, and also sort of how the the changing of the structure that Nick is proposing would affect that. So from what I understand, my original thought process when we kind of went with the core controller method that was responsible for the binding and that sort of thing was that the implementation details for the default resource class could kind of live in there. But now I think it's going to have to be broken out separately. So I'm going to be moving forward kind of in that path.
Yeah, and that makes sense. From my experiences working with Nick over the last year is that he does not very often tend to be wrong about his design hunches. So
Right.
I think that feedback was a really good idea. And, looking into that and incorporating it from that perspective, I think is smart.
Right.
Awesome. And so the rest of the tickets here, I think, are kind of things we already covered. Like 519 is a general ticket for getting all of our documentation for all the cloud providers up to date. And then the last one here, 548. So we had talked about when I had merged the design for what we're calling extensions into master a few weeks ago. That allow new applications, new cloud providers, et cetera, to be there's support for them and functionality for them to be added to the Crossplane to its control plane, and not having to be built inside the main Crossplane repo and ship along with the Crossplane core functionality, and to be installed, at initial Crossplane deployment time, et cetera, et cetera. We had called out that currently, the only way to add new support like that is to write an entire controller runtime based Kubernetes custom controller, which is a fairly large development burden to be able to add, or to have to write a whole controller to add some new functionality. So Marcus is going to do a little bit of prototyping and investigation work there on alternative means to be able to add new functionality to Crossplane without having to write a whole controller. So templating, being able to write templates, and similar to an experience you might be familiar with already from Helm, or functions or hooks, webhooks, et cetera, where you implement just key parts of your business logic for a controller. And then there's a overall meta controller style controller that is doing the main reconciliation and main controller responsibilities, and just calling into simple code, simple functions that you've written to be able to manage your resource a very scoped way. Marcus is looking into the prototyping those types of implementations and see what the obstacles are, what the challenges are, how that design is shaking out for, and we're scoping that to the WordPress example, since it's pretty constrained example, and it makes usage of resource claims and classes, et cetera. So it's got a good surface area, but it's fairly scoped as well. And so Marcus will be doing some prototyping work there to inform how we can improve our development experience and how we can make it easier to continue adding new support in Crossplane for new applications, new services, new resources, et cetera. And then just the last thing here about the project and the milestone for 0.3 is that you can see here near the top of the to-do column that we have a number of other design tickets related here. So for the whole extensions work, how we do dependency resolution, how we upgrade, what's our isolation story, et cetera. That is all work that needs to be figured out. And then also this one here, 351, the workload security. That's a huge topic that is going to be really important that Nick is going to be looking into soon. And that is all about, when you bring up a resource, let's say like a MySQL database, and how do you first make sure that the workload that wants to use it, let's say WordPress, how do you give access to the database from WordPress? How can you make sure that it can connect to it? If they've set up the VPCs or subnets or security groups or whatever it may be, how do you do that? And then how do you do that in a very secure way as well? So it's very scoped that only that resource will be able to access it. And it's not open to other services or other connections that may want to sneak in there. So that's a really important part of our design and security and ease of use of the platform as well. And so we wanted to front load that one and de-risk that in this milestone as well. So we're looking forward to seeing what Nick comes up with that one. Okay, so I think that's everything for 0.3. We got a whole lot in progress here, but we have, a fair amount of contributors that are pitching in and tackling all these things too. So there's a whole lot of activity going on in the Crossplane project right now. And, I'm really excited about all the progress that we're making here. Okay, so the next topic I had on the agenda today is that CoopCon Shanghai is ongoing right now. I think it's in the second or third day right now. And there were two talks that members of the Crossplane community were giving in Shanghai. The first, and that's why they're not here at the meeting today, because I think it's like early in the morning, like 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. there right now in Shanghai. So Ilya was giving a talk about how to extend the Kubernetes scheduler for multi-cluster and multi-cloud workloads. So we had started a lot of this work and done some design and exploration, et cetera, for Crossplane specifically, where you have a multi-cloud control plane and you want to make scheduling decisions and optimize for various attributes about where you place different resources in different clusters and different clouds, and how do you make sure that everything is well connected and optimized, et cetera. So Ilya's giving a talk about that. And the agenda document has a link to it there that you'll be able to get the slide deck and also the YouTube recording as well. And for CoopCon Barcelona last month, they put up the YouTube recordings of the talks before the conference was even over. So look to, by the end of the week, maybe if they keep up that same pace that they did for Barcelona, look at these links here if you want to watch those talks, hopefully by the end of the week. And then Steve was giving a talk this week about composability in cloud native applications and how you can take basic primitives and building blocks such that Crossplane offers you and compose them as a unified set of resources into higher level applications and services. So very excited about both those talks. And I will be watching those YouTube links this weekend probably because I am super cool and do cool things on the weekend like that. I have a life. And then the other thing about CoopCon I want to talk about is that I just heard yesterday that the call for papers or proposals for San Diego is open. The San Diego CoopCon conference is in November. And let's see, when is the window here for proposals? Let's see here. So, oh gosh, it opened back in May. Okay, I am late to that party. And the close is July 12th. So there is just about 3 weeks left to submit a proposal to speak in San Diego. So anybody who is interested in submitting a proposal there might want to get moving on that. There's about 3 weeks left. And just a note too, I live in San Diego, and so I will most certainly be here for this CoopCon. And I'm happy to meet up with anybody from the community and show you around a little bit of this amazing piece of paradise that we call San Diego. Very excited to host a CoopCon here. Okay, so we had, Nick's not here, and we had talked about the core resource controller, resource claim controller refactoring that he was doing. We got into that a little bit and provided some details there. So there's a link to that pull request in the agenda document if you want to weigh in there or provide any comments or feedback on it. And that, I think, is all that I had on the agenda document today. Were there any other topics that anybody on this call wanted to add or to bring up right now in this venue? All right. Last call in case anybody is on mute. All right, sounds great. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining in today. I'm really excited about all the work that we're tackling for 0.3 and will set us up for future milestones as well. A lot of activity going on and excited to see all the progress that we're making. So thanks everybody for joining today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.